Okay, so we're moving in from the meditation space into 20 minutes of talking about prosperity. And I'm working without a script, but I'm talking from the heart. I'm talking from my own experience. It's been a good couple of years where I have been studying and learning and growing around the issue of prosperity. And I share from my experience what has been working for me. As I said before, I'm not coming from a hierarchical teacher point of view where I've got the answers and I expect you to do what I say. It's more a case of I honour those teachers that have shown me their way when I have been learning, and I want to pass that on, because what has really helped me in the last couple of years, when this has been a time where I've been coming out of a place of real deprivation and I've been coming back into my strength and into my wealth, there have been these people who have offered me signposts along the way. Now, I guess it's important to define at the outset what we mean when we're talking about prosperity, because I think it would be a mistake to pin prosperity on our bank balance. Prosperity does not in itself necessarily mean that we have lots and lots of money. But it might be that we define for ourselves that a really healthy bank balance is one of our indicators of prosperity. But I think it's much broader than that, and that if we spend our time focusing on money itself, we lose sight of the underlying principles that support growth and health and overall wealth and well-being. And these are the kind of things that I associate with prosperity. So for somebody who is in poor health, then increasing their well-being, increasing their sense of health is a prosperous act. And the same thing applies to somebody who doesn't have enough money, who's not making ends meet. To bring about a certain amount of material wealth is a prosperous act. But prosperity is more a state of consciousness in which we are generally in the positive, and that we feel connected to and we are expressing the creative force in our lives. And that force of creation goes beyond material wealth into our ability to have functioning, healthy, happy relationships, to find work that is meaningful for us, to find the people in our lives, the friendships in our lives, the networks in our lives that really support us and nourish us and help us to grow. So there are certain qualities that I associate with prosperity consciousness, and number one at the top of the list is love. It's self-love, it's love for whatever we perceive the source of our life to be, so that whatever we understand God to be, whether that is an external God or an inner higher principle or whatever works for us. But finding that love of spirit, finding that love of the divine, the sacred, and extending through our connection to ourselves and to God, connecting to other people from that higher space, that higher self. And as we step into that higher self, we raise our frequency and vibrations so that those people around us are also freed up to be everything that they can be, and that the kind of people that we attract to us are the kind of people that we want in our lives. So that's me defining prosperity in very loose terms, because I'm inviting you to find for yourselves what prosperity means to you. But a really helpful metaphor that I like to use is to imagine that there's a scale, almost like a balance scale in front of us. And on one side, we have prosperity consciousness, and on the other, we have its opposite, which is poverty consciousness. And that when we tip the scales in favour of prosperity consciousness, then our lives take on a certain quality of flow. And all the striving and struggle and hardship in life takes on a finer quality. So it would be disingenuous of me to say, oh, do this prosperity class and your life will be great, because hardship and suffering and difficulties are inherent in the human experience. What I have found through my own experience, though, is that through maintaining a spiritual practice, through refining my experience through the lens of spirituality, I've found that my problems and worries are, at best, a real opportunity for growth and a delight. But obviously, more commonly, they're areas for me to engage with in terms of learning and strengthening and overcoming, and they have formed part of the fabric of my experience that I'm able to then take out into the world. They give my life meaning. So it's almost as simplistic as glass half full, glass half empty, in a way, because in many ways we can be in prosperity consciousness and have none of the indicators that might tell us that we are. So our bank balance may not be very high, we may be living in a place that we perhaps isn't our ideal, we might be working in a job that we prefer not to, but we can approach it with this glass half full way of being that says, do you know what? Actually, I can see the good, I can see the good, I can see the good. And as you do that, it takes on a more sparkly quality. And so that is prosperity consciousness. When we're in the glass half empty and everything seems grey and everything seems difficult and it's like pushing stuff uphill or going against the flow, it becomes much more sticky and tricky. And one of the main teachings of prosperity, and I suppose I ought to say that when I talk about prosperity teachings, I'm drawing on the works of people like Napoleon Hill, Catherine Ponder, more recently Maggie Whitehouse, and I can send you the links to the books and to these people. But particularly the work of Catherine Ponder was born out of the New Thought movement of the early 20th century, which was coming from a predominantly Christian background, looking at the messages that she found within the Bible that talked about prosperity, and she found that as she taught these principles, she became very prosperous, and everybody else that was learning these principles became prosperous. Now, what I have personally done is taken those teachings into myself and stripped them of their Christian origin. That's what suits me. I'm interested on an intellectual level on what goes on in the Bible, but it's not my personal faith path. And I feel that perhaps that's what I'm offering is an interfaith or non-religious take on prosperity teachings. But one of the central tenets of prosperity teachings is that as we think, so we create. And it draws on the idea that everything that we have in our lives, our entire sphere around us, all that we can see, all that we can touch, all that we experience, we bring into being through our thoughts. And this might take a little bit of explaining, I don't know. But I understand it from studying yoga, and that there are many layers to the human experience. There's the physical layer, there's the breath layer, there's the mental energy layer, there's the imaginary plane, and then there's supposedly the creative force that may be called God. And that all things start in the imaginary plane. We imagine what we might want in our lives, and that we draw that into being. The more that it matters to us, the more it comes into matter. So that we draw down what we want in our lives into the physical. And it's almost as if, well, I feel it's important to say that I don't personally believe that there is a distinction between the physical world and the spiritual world. There isn't a boundary that separates the two. They're all on a particular spectrum, in the same way that water, being H2O, is present in the form of ice, in water, and in steam. It's all H2O, it's just present in different forms. So as we draw what we can imagine or vision, as we draw that into our reality, the extent to which it manifests in our physical reality is down to the quality of the thoughts that it passes through. The thoughts that they pass through is the filter. So when our thoughts are clear and focused and happy and healthy, then what we might wish to manifest in our life, whether it's money, health, better work, friendships, relationships, whatever we wish to manifest, if it passes through a clear filter of the mind, then it manifests easily in our physical world. But what happens is that the human mind is a poor filter at the best of times. And then in addition to that, we can get very trapped in the scripts and stories of our life and the society that we live in, and they run in our minds and they clag up the mental sphere, so that when we come to manifest, a lot of our dreams and visions and hopes don't get through the mental plane. And so the journey into prosperity is one of learning to clear the mind of negativity, of self-defeating thoughts, of, let's have a think, scripts that we run from our ancestry, things that have come down through our generations, generation on generation, those patterns that bind us. And so what we're talking about is essentially a spiritual journey. Although I would be hesitant to say that it is about an absenteeism of spirituality where we go into, meditate in a cave. When we feel called to do work on prosperity, we're being called into the practical. So we're being called into, H2O as ice. We're being called into our money and our work and the way that we interact with people. So although it's a spiritual path, it's ostensibly practical in its manifestation. And our ability to have meaningful relationships and to find the work that we want and to have the amount of money that we want is governed, along with our thoughts, with our sense of being worthy and our sense of being good enough and our ability to retain that sense of worthiness despite whatever signals we might feel we pick up from other people. So I've kind of covered, I'm going to summarise, but I've kind of covered the key points I wanted to go over in week 1, which is what prosperity is, defining it in its broadest term and asking you to define it for yourself, talking about the root of prosperity teachings and that sense that we create our reality with our thoughts. So over the next 6 weeks, we'll be looking at ways in which we can bring a clarity and peace of mind into our everyday world that enables us to better make manifest our dreams. And part of that will be looking at those patterns, ancestral patterns of perhaps poverty, attachment, lessons that we learnt as a child about our sense of worthiness or what we might be entitled to or not entitled to, as the case may be. Looking at the key belief systems that lock us into poverty thinking and methods about how we can get from that state of mind, or identify that state of mind, how we can bring ourselves over into the weighing the scales in favour of the positive, weighing the scales in favour of prosperity. And the kind of things that I'm talking about include affirmations, visualisation, meditation, visioning, and using group support like this class in order to bring those visions into the public realm rather than being perhaps in the back of our minds. So I feel it's important to say that yes, it's a spiritual journey, but it's ostensibly a practical journey, that we can't separate the two. So another thing that I'll be covering in the 6-week course is some of the practical actions that we need to take to ensure that the universe feels we can hold the prosperity and abundance that comes to us. But that we mustn't get caught up, and I know that there's a lot of people who think that money and spirituality are not compatible. If money is just a tool by which we exchange energy, by which we denote value, then we do need to see it as a spiritual commodity in physical form. And that we'll be reinforcing and building upon the notion that it is a sense of self-worth, a sense of self-belief that raises our vibration into that state of positive thinking and prosperity. And that the more we choose our thoughts, the more able we are to think deliberately and start to bring what we want through our thoughts into physical manifestation, it snowballs. So it starts off slow at first, and you have to look for the little miracles at first, just little miracles, synchronicities and coincidences. And it's been my experience over the past 3 years that this has snowballed now into a daily experience of magnificent miracles, of people stepping forward and just offering what it is that I'm looking for. And so though it might only be 6 weeks, at the end of this 6 weeks, I would love to hear great big miracles. But what I actually aim to do is to simply equip you to take this work forward. And if it's something that you think, wow, this has really caught my imagination, it's something that I'd like to explore more, then there is a whole wealth of resources out there, a whole raft of authors and different approaches that I can recommend. So there we go. That's me bringing my 20 minutes to a close. I'm going to stop recording. There we go.